Hi, welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to make some super cute little slippers for kids. These are called the Child Fur Boot Slippers. And when I say fur boot, I'm talking they look like real fur. Look at this stuff. This is not your regular old eyelash yarn, guys. This has eyelashes on both sides and it's super thick. It looks like it could be some sort of like a Muppet, huh? It's so much fun. So we're going to learn how to use this yarn. We're also going to learn how to sew it up onto some really cute little soles of slippers, and we're going to have these really great fur slippers. Look down here. I'm going to show you what I need you to do once you download the pattern over at redheart.com. Did I mention this is a free pattern? It is totally free. All right, so when you download your pattern over at redheart.com, you're going to see that it comes to you something like this. The first thing I want you to do is grab a highlighter, and I want you to highlight the size you're going to make. The reason I want you to do that is we're going to go through the whole pattern and we're going to highlight all of the numbers that pertain to that particular size. It will help you keep place in your pattern to make sure that you are not accidentally working one of the other numbers when you should be working one of the smaller numbers. So for this pattern, I'm working the directions for the child size 4 to 8. And so that number is the number outside of the parentheses. All the numbers inside the parentheses pertain to either child size 7 to 11, 10 to 2, or 2 to 6. And those are child's shoe sizes, okay? So when I go through the entire pattern here and I start working with the sole, right here I'm going to make 2 of them because we have 2 feet. I can see as I'm reading along the pattern and I get to the section where it has a number and then a parenthesis and then there's 3 numbers within the parenthesis. I want to highlight the outside number because I'm doing the size that pertains to that number on the outside. Does that make sense? I carry on and I do that throughout the whole pattern, whether it's an actual stitch number or it's a measurement number. So that way I know where I need to be in the pattern. Once you do that, it just makes things so much easier as you begin working the pattern, okay? Okay, so go grab your pattern and then do all of the highlighting I need you to do for your size. Grab your materials, join me back here. I'm going to get you started on how to make the sole of the slipper, and then I'm going to show you how to work into the yarn. All right, you've prepared your pattern, you've gathered your materials. Let's go ahead and jump in and make the sole of this slipper. The first thing the pattern wants us to do is to cast on 5 stitches. Again, remember that I am making the smallest size. If you're making one of the other sizes that you've highlighted the numbers for, I want you to use that cast on number. I'm using the long tail cast on for this method, and you'll notice I have 2 colors of yarn that I'm working with. The reason is throughout the entire sole of this pattern, you want to hold 2 strands of yarn. So I've chosen to do 2 different colors so that you could see how this looks, but you don't have to use 2 colors. You can use just 1 color or a variegated, or you can use 2 colors, completely up to you. I'm going to do my long tail cast on. If you need a refresher on how to do long tail cast on, please visit the Marley Bird YouTube channel directions for long tail cast on, and you will get all the instructions you need right there. So I've cast on 5 stitches, which is what I wanted to do because that's what the pattern tells me to do. The next section says that we're going to do an increase, and this whole pattern is worked in garter stitch, so we will be knitting every row. We won't have to do any purls. The first thing it tells us to do is to KFB. That's a knit front and back. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into this first stitch, and remember you have 2 strands, so you're going to make sure you go into both strands of yarn. We're going to go in, we're going to yarn over our needle and pop those strands out, but we're not going to let this stitch jump off our left hand needle yet. What I need you to do is take your right hand needle and really extend that stitch that you just created, swivel your right hand needle around, and we're going to go into the back leg of that same stitch that you just went into on the left hand needle. Now we're going to knit again through the back leg of this same stitch. And now we'll let that stitch jump off the left-hand needle, and we've created 2 stitches. We have 2 stitches where there was 1, and you'll notice that one of them looks like a purl and one of them looks like a knit. Totally perfect. That's what we want it to be. So we knit front and back the first stitch, and then it says to knit to the end of the row. So I'm going to knit to the end of this row. Another little tip I'd like to make is as you're working along and you might lose count of where you are, and the fact that we have to make 2 of these soles identical, it's really helpful if you use a little stitch marker, or not a stitch marker, I apologize, a pencil, and do a little tally mark on your pattern. Or Red Heart has these really cool counters, like stitch counters that go on your finger, and so you can keep it on your finger and you can just hit the button and you can know whenever you finished a row. So you could use either one of those. I'm here and I've turned, and it says for row 2 I have to do the same thing. So I'm going to do a knit front and back on this side now. I'm going to go in, knit the first stitch, extend my needle out just to give myself enough slack to swivel around and go into the back leg of that same stitch. See, I'm in the back leg of that same stitch, yarn over, come out that stitch, and then I'm going to let my left stitch jump off. So I have 2 stitches where there was only 1. And then I go ahead and I knit to the end of the row. When I complete this, because I did 2 increases, I'm going to have 7 stitches. Now it says I need to work even in garter stitch, which is knitting every row, until my piece measures 2.5 inches. So this is where I think it's really important to keep track of how many rows you've completed, so that way you can make a sole that's identical to the one you're creating. So all I want you to do right now is I want you to go ahead and knit until you have the correct number of inches that you need for the size you're going to make, and then join me back here and we're going to go on to the next part. All right, so you're done with the first section. We're moving on to the next part where we have to increase out for the pad of our foot, all right, for the ball of our foot. Look down here, I'm going to show you what you need to do. You can see right here that I have 2.5 inches completed, and I'm getting ready to work the next section, which says I need to repeat row 1 twice. So again, row 1 was a knit front and back, right? So I'm going to go into the first stitch and knit it, give myself a little slack, swivel around, and go into the back leg of the same stitch. You'll notice now that I'm back to where I'm showing you how it looks in the same color. I wanted you to be able to see what it looks like in one color also, so that you don't get confused if you are seeing it with one color and I was showing you with 2 colors. Then it just says to knit to the end of the row. You can also see that I am doing this English style for those of you out there who like to see the instructions, English style as well as continental. And one more. Now it says to repeat row 1 twice, so we're going to do it one more time, and this will give us our increase for the ball of our foot. Once we finish this increase, remember I have to do a knit front and back, and now jump off. Once we finish this row 1 twice, then we're going to go back to working just in plain garter stitch, which is knitting every row until the piece measures 4.5 inches for me, for the size I'm making. If you're making a different size, your size should actually be highlighted if you followed the instructions at the beginning of this video, and I want you to work until your piece measures that number of inches, okay? So we are going to just pretend that we have the correct number of inches here, and we're going to go on to the next section, okay? So we're going to pretend I did those increases and it's time for me to work 4.5 inches until it works 4.5 inches. So we're going to imagine this is total 4.5 inches, okay? Because the next row is a decrease row, and I want you to see what that is. So we are just going to pretend, okay? So the next row, we're going to do decreases, and this is to shape for the toes. So this is really easy, you guys. We're going to start off with a knit 2 together. So for a knit 2 together, remember we have 2 strands of yarn here that we're using. So we want to make sure that we are going over and we're working both stitches. So you're going to have 4 strands of yarn, and you're going through both of those stitches, and we're going to knit those 2 stitches together, just like that. So what we had 2, and we've now turned those into 1 stitch. Then it says knit to the end of the row. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll knit to the end of the row. This is really fast when you're making little kid stuff. It goes super quick. It's actually quite convenient. So once I do this, I am going to have a total of 8 stitches, because I had 9 and now I'm going to have 8. Now it says to repeat the last row of decreases 3 more times. Okay, so I will end up with 5 stitches. So if I'm going to repeat it 3 more times, I'm right here. I'm going to do a knit 2 together. So I'm going into the second stitch on my left hand needle and through the first stitch, and then give myself some slack. And then I will knit those 2 together and then finish my row. Once I'm done and I have all of the stitches worked and I'm left with my 5 stitches, I'm going to bind off and set this aside so the sole is complete. What I would do is I would do the second sole right now. Once you complete the first sole, just get it done and out of the way, so that way you can move on to the leg of the slipper and you will have no problem with like second slipper syndrome. So I am here, I'm doing, this is the second decrease that I've done, and then I'll have one more and I can show you how to bind off, just so those of you who aren't really sure how to bind off, I can show you how to do that. So I have one more decrease, so I'm going to do my knit 2 together. Did I do an increase last time? I did an increase. Are you kidding me? That is so funny. So I'm going to show you how to tink. You want to tink? So I'm going here and I'm going to go into the mother of that stitch that's on my right hand needle and drop my stitch off my right hand needle. I'm doing this rather quickly. You can go check out the tinking video if you want to find out more about how to tink, but essentially I'm just stretching the stitches out and I'm taking my left hand needle and I'm sticking it into the stitch below the stitch that's on my right hand needle, and I'm unknitting all the way down the row. And then this one, I'm going to let that one fall off because that was a stitch I created, and then I'm going to do that. So now I'm back to where I was, and I need to do an actual decrease, not an increase. So I'll do my knit 2 together. Geez, some things I just don't know. All right, and I'm down to the end here, and then one more decrease. Now I really do have a decrease. So I will do my knit 2 together as I split the yarn, and then knit to the end of the row. Once I do that, as I mentioned, I'm going to do my bind off. So I will do my bind off right now, and it's really super easy. I have my 5 stitches. I go ahead, I knit the first stitch and let it go to my right hand needle. Knit the next stitch, right hand needle. Now I take my left hand needle, go into the first stitch I completed, and have it jump up and over the second stitch. Take my left hand needle off, and it's like that stitch is around the throat of this stitch right there. It's like it's a scarf, okay? It's a scarf around the stitch, the second stitch we did. So we have to do that again. We knit 1 stitch, have the back stitch, jump up and over the front stitch and off. Knit 1 more stitch, back stitch, jumps up and over the front stitch and off. Last one, knit 1 more stitch, back stitch, jumps up and over the front stitch and off. Once you're done binding off, leave a tail that's at least 6 inches long, finish off your work and set it aside, and we'll get started with the first slipper. All right, you have 2 soles of your slippers complete, and it's time to jump into the fur body of the slipper. Now, what's really great about the fur body is you make it separate from the slipper and then you seam it on. Now, that might seem a little scary, right? Because there's a lot of fur going on here, but that's actually one of the convenient things, is that nobody's ever going to see anything, because I can't see stitches at all in here. It looks like just one big furry softness of goodiness. Like, it just feels really great. So when we complete this, we will sew it on to the sole of our slipper. The other great thing about not being able to see the stitches is nobody is going to see your mistakes. The bad thing about not being able to see your stitches is if you drop a stitch, you're not going to be able to find it. So it's very, very important that you really keep track of your stitches as you're working along with this. Let's take a look at the yarn a little bit, and I'm going to talk you through this. This particular yarn we're using is called Red Heart Boutique Fur. And I mean, I am telling you, as I said at the beginning, it's not your basic eyelash yarn, you guys. There are so many more lashes attached to this center seam right here, and it's on both sides, and it is really soft and just really cuddly and warm. Like, it feels really good. So as you're knitting along with this, it's really difficult to see the stitches as they're made because there are the eyelashes on both sides, right? So it's going to be really important that as you're knitting, you are really using your fingertips to kind of feel for that seam to find where you need to take your needle and put it into the stitch to actually knit it, okay? You're going to go a lot by feel with this, and that's the best way I can explain it, okay? I'm not going to work with this in the video because I feel like you're not going to be able to see it very well, but I am going to show you a couple of cast-ons and a couple of the first stitches so you can see how it will look, and then I'm going to talk you through what you need to do with this particular pattern, okay? So the first thing the pattern wants you to do is it wants you to cast on 17. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do a long tail cast on, and I'm just going to do a couple of stitches here. Like you can even tell I'm doing a slip knot, right? It looks like kind of a mess, but I promise I'm doing a slip knot right there. Okay. So I have my slip knot, it's on my needle, and I'm just going to do the long tail cast on. And the reason I chose the long tail cast on is it really creates that nice first cast on edge, knit edge of your work. So as I'm going along, I'm just going through the motions. I can't actually see stitches. I can't see a window. I'm just going through the motions, right? So if I were to cast on, let's just say however many I have there, and I turn and I'm getting ready to work my stitches, you can see, I'm going to move these out of the way. You can see that you can't see, right? It's very difficult to see. But I can tell you that as I hold my finger here and I move them along the stitches, I can feel that center seam of the stitches, and I can sense where the stitch actually is. And again, when I talk about the center seam, it's that center seam right there. I can feel it on my needle. So as I get ready to start working my knits, I'm holding my yarn just like I normally do, and I bring the stitch forward the best I can and kind of use my needle to rub across and find the seam. Okay, you see how I'm doing that? So then I can kind of tuck my needle in and underneath, and I can feel the grab there. I can feel that I'm actually in a stitch, yarn over and create my knit stitch just like normal, and jump off. See what I mean about if you drop a stitch, you're kind of lost. So you don't want to drop stitches here. So I'll try this again. If I bring this one forward, I'm just kind of using my needle to kind of feel it, and I can feel the seam. Can you hear that? I'm going over the seam there. So I can take my needle and I can go right underneath that seam, and I can feel, oh, look, I'm in a stitch. I can feel that. You have to go you have to use a lot of feeling when it comes to this particular stitch pattern. And this one, I can see the seam. You see that seam right there? So that's kind of nice. I can see the seam, so I can see the stitch, and I can go in and I'm in an actual stitch and I can work this. So that's how you're going to work with this yarn, okay? So let's take this and set this aside. I'm going to walk you through how to do this part of the pattern, and we're going to go back and we're going to use the two colors that we had used before just to show you how this will work, okay? So I'm just going to grab let's stick with the same needle. The needle you use for the fur yarn is actually much larger than the needle you use for your sole yarn, the sole of your shoe, and you already know that for sure. So I don't have to really point that out, but just so you know, I'm using this same needle I used for the sole just because I'm using the same yarn. So I'm going to pretend I'm doing the fur right now, and I'm just going to cast on my 17 stitches, okay? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, so imagine those were the 17 fur stitches. The first thing the instructions tell you to do is to go ahead and knit 8 stitches, okay? So you're going to knit 8 stitches just like normal. So you knit them. And again, when you're dealing with the fur, you're going to have to, it's like you're going like this with your needle with the fur. Can you see that? And you're feeling like you're trying to find the seam so you can go into the stitch, okay? So we're going to knit 8 stitches. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now it says that it wants you to add a marker. So I'm going to take a marker and I'm going to put it on there. When you're dealing with the fur, you want to make sure you're using really large markers. That way you can see where they are. Then you're going to knit 1 stitch and then place another marker. What we're doing is we are marking the center of the toe of the slipper. And we're going to decrease in towards the center stitch there. It's the stitch between the markers for X number of rows. And once we're done decreasing in to shape the top of the foot, we'll work straight up, and that will be the body of our slipper sock. Okay, so now we have these nice stitches. I've knit 8 and then put a marker, knit 1, put a marker, knit 8. If you're dealing with other numbers, make sure you're working with the numbers that pertain to the size you're making. I'm going to keep repeating that so you guys don't accidentally use my numbers. Okay, so I've done that, and it says that we are going to go for row 2, which is a decrease row. What this decrease row is doing is, if you imagine that center stitch right here is the top of our toe, we are going to decrease all the stitches in towards the top of our foot to really shape the top of the slipper, okay? And it's really easily done. And so we are going to go ahead, we're going to knit to within 2 stitches of the marker. So I'm going to knit to within 2 stitches. And again, this is going to be difficult when you're dealing with the fur yarn. So it's almost easier to kind of remember how many stitches you had. So if I had 8 stitches of fur yarn, I would knit 6, and that would leave me with 7 and 8. And those 7 and 8 would be the ones that I'm dealing with. So counting as you're going along when you're working with the fur really does help, okay? So I'm right here, we're going to do our decrease, and our decrease here is an SKP. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to slip the next stitch as if to knit. So I'm going to go in as if to knit and slip it. I'm going to knit the next stitch, and then I'm going to pass this slip stitch up and over. Now, at first when I came across the pattern and I saw this, I was thinking to myself, why didn't the designer just have you do a knit 2 together? And the thing is, just doing a knit 2 together, it made it so that it was, how do I say this? It was difficult. It was difficult to do the knit 2 togethers with the fur yarn. And so actually doing the slip 1, knit 1, pass the slip stitch over, it made it a lot easier for a decrease. So I slip my marker, I go ahead and I knit the next one. I slip my marker, and again, I do the slip, knit, and pass slip stitch over. So I slip 1, I knit 1, and I pass the slip stitch over. So I've done my decrease, and I knit to end. I'm going to repeat that row, okay, doing the decrease row 2 times more for the size I'm making. If you're doing one of the other sizes, it could be more times than just 2. Once you've done that, you're going to remove the markers, and you will work another 2 rows or more rows. For me, it would be another 2 rows in garter stitch, and then I would bind off my work, and I would bind off just like I did the sole of the slipper. Okay, go ahead, grab the appropriate size needles and your fur yarn, cast on the number of stitches you need to do, and create the fur part of your slipper. Once it's all done, join me back here. I'm going to show you how to connect it to the sole using stitch markers for placement, and then we're going to whip stitch them together and finish up this really cute slipper. Whew, that was a lot of knitting, wasn't it? It's so much fun to knit with this fur yarn, but it can be a little bit difficult. Hopefully your guys's turned out really well, and as you were knitting along, some of my tips really helped you as far as feeling the seam for the fur. Now comes the challenge of how do we weave in these ends, and how do we join this to the sole of the slipper that we completed. Look down here, I'm going to show you how we do that. The first thing I did when I noticed that I was going to have a really hard time weaving in this end, you know what I did? I was like, you know what? You can't see any of the stitches anyways. And I think that if I just weave it in using my crochet hook, I'm going to be just fine. So what I did is I grabbed a large crochet hook and just willy-nilly, I just poked it in. So I just poked it in anywhere, kind of grabbed the yarn, and I pulled it through with my crochet hook. All right. And then I did it the opposite direction. I poked it in, grabbed the yarn, and pulled it through with my crochet hook. You can't see where I just tucked it in, can you? And as long as I go one direction and then turn around and go back the other direction, I'm going back the other way now, I feel like, you know what, that should be plenty good enough as far as weaving in this tail. It's a little bit tricky, but I felt like this was this was a good way to do it. Look, it's not coming undone. I did it already to the other side. You can't tell where it is at all, and it looks really good. So that's how you're going to weave in this tail. If you haven't already woven in the tails of your sole, you need to go ahead and do that also, because once you get this attached to the sole of your slipper, it's going to be really difficult to get in there and weave in your tails. So make sure you've woven in all of your tails right now, okay? So we've done that. The instructions say, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cut this tail because I've woven it in quite a bit. And I'm just cutting it right there at the seam. Set that down there. You'll get a little flybys, but they're all right. They're going to be just fine. No more than the little girl that gets these slippers are going to pull off, right? Okay. So I know that this is the bottom of my slipper boot that I've created, and this was my cast on edge. And the instructions say to go ahead and fold the project lengthwise on the cast on edge. So if I fold it this way along the cast on edge, and then it says to mark the center. So this is my center point, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use one of these big fat markers that I've been using all along, and I'm going to mark my center point, okay? I'm also going to mark my center point on the sole of my sock also, or my slipper sock, okay? So my center point here, and you know what? This can be a guesstimation. This doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, is right there, okay? What's going to happen is I'm going to match up those 2 points, and as I take the edge of this slipper sock, I am going to start seaming it to the edge of this slipper, okay? And I'm just going to match up those 2 points, and so then as this edge comes around and it matches up all the way along here, along there, all the way to the back, once both are all the way sewn up to the back, I'll whip stitch this edge here all the way up, and the boot will be complete. Can you see that? How it'll be like that? So I found it easiest, once you match those 2 up, we also want to match up the different sections. It's just easier. So if I know that all of this needs to be meeting up, and this edge here, I got to find my edge. There's my edge. And I want that to be at the center back. So I'm just going to pin it to my center back. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm going to grab this edge. I'm going to find it. I'm using my fingers a lot to just kind of feel it, feel where it is. I'm going to pin this again to the other side of the center back because I know that's where they need to meet up. I'm just trying to make it easiest for me as far as seaming, right? So if these 2 points meet up, I'm going to go ahead. I'm unbuckling the center point of the boot and I'm fastening it to the center point of the slipper. I'll take the slipper point out. Okay, see where I am so far? Okay, I think I did the wrong edge up here. I did, so I'm going to undo that. I did the outer edge. Where am I? Did you hate that? There it is. Yes, I did the outer edge. I need this edge right there. That's the edge I want. So I have my edge right there because it's coming up, and I have it pinned right there. Okay, now you can see it looks a lot easier. So now these are my 2, this is the body of the boot. So those will be seamed together. This down here, the whole cast on edge is what's getting attached to the bottom edge of this boot down there. Okay, you see that? That's where we're going to whip stitch it together. And again, we're going to do this as by feel as we can. So I'm just grabbing, again, I'm grabbing my 2 colors just so you guys can better see where I am joining things. And I'm using a bent tip steel tapestry needle, okay? I find these really easy to use when I'm trying to dig into stitches, and they work through the acrylic yarn really easily, okay? So I love using steel tapestry needles. So I'm going to thread my needle, and this is really easy. If you take the eye of your needle, push it up against the yarn, and then pinch the yarn right around the eye of your needle, pull that out, take the eye of your needle and wiggle it on, and look at that, super easy. I made sure that I have a length of yarn that's long enough to go around the whole piece, and I'm going to start on the back of the heel, okay? So I'm going to start back here. And if I wanted to make sure things are just evened up even more, if I wanted to make it easier for myself, I can just grab that. I'm just grabbing a little section of the fur, attaching it to the heel there, and I'll do the same thing over here. I'm grabbing a little section of the fur and attaching it to the adjacent part of the sole, okay? Can you see that? So now everything's kind of really secure in place as much as possible. I'm going to join my yarn with a, just in a manner, how would I say this? I just kind of join it in a figure 8 just right here, I'm going to go up and I'm going to pull this up as much as possible until I have a little bit of a tail left, and I'll come back down and I'll come down on this side. And then I'm going to come back up over here. Okay. And again, I'm just going on the outside edge of the sole of my slipper. And then now as I'm going around, I'm just going to do whip stitches. And whip stitches, it's literally just going in and out, just going like this all the way around. So I'm going to go into my sole of my slipper and I'm using my fingers. You can't really see, they're on the inside, and I'm feeling for the edge of the fur, and I'm just sticking my needle right through it. So I kind of feel for the edge and I'm sticking the needle through and I'm just whip stitching it. So I'm pulling this through. If I can grab the yarn appropriately, there we go. And I've done one. So I'll come back up, I'll go to the next section. Maybe I can split through the stitches. I can feel the fur, I have to feel it. I'm sticking through both of them. And then I pull through again. Okay, you can see that it's just joining right there. It's rather invisible because the fur is so dense. Go ahead, go all the way around the sole of your slipper and join me back when you're back to your beginning point, okay? And then I'm going to show you how to seam up the bottom part of the slipper, okay? All right, you have it all seamed up, and it's time to seam the back of the slipper. So look down here and I'm going to show you what you need to do. You can see that I'm taking out the markers that I had in place, holding the sole in place with the fur. And I've went around just once, all the way around, joining the fur to the sole. If you wanted to go around a second time just to make sure everything was in place, you absolutely could. But you can kind of you'll see I have my fingers in there and I'm kind of feeling around to see if there's any gaping holes, and I don't feel any. The stitch markers or the things that you have holding everything in place really do help. Hopefully you guys did give those a try. So what we have to do now is, if I flip this, there we are, right? What I need to do now is I need to seam up this section. So what I'm going to do is I'm using my fingers here to find the edge. So there's the edge right there. It's the bind off edge. There's one of them. And then I'm going to look up here and I'm going to find the other edge, and it's right there. And so I'm going to mark it. I find the markers really helpful, you guys, because it helps me keep things in place. So if I have this edge and this edge, and I want them to meet up at the very end, right? So what I've done here is I've marked both edges, and I'm just going to kind of hold those in place. And so as I have the heel of the slipper pointing down here, I have this opening, and this is what I'm seaming closed. So just like you did when you were seaming the sole to the fur, you're going to do essentially the same thing, only now we're going to make sure these hold in place. Okay, and we're going to do a whip stitch. So you're going to grab the side edge here. So I'm just going to go in, grab a side edge there. I'm going to go across to the corresponding side, grab a side edge there, pull my needle through. I know this is really hard to see. I have both edges and I'm pulling up. You'll see I have my yarn that I did around the entire piece here still attached. Like, I'm not doing a new thing of yarn at all. I'm just doing the exact same piece of yarn. I'm not going to go back this direction. You could. I'm just going to come back across, grab this side again, and come across and grab the corresponding side once again, making sure I have something there and it's not just the wisps of the eyelash of the fur. All right, so I am just whipping this all the way up. And if you're using yarn or the same yarn that you used for the sole to whip this closed, look, it doesn't even show. Like, even the two colors I'm using, I can't see anything. It looks really cool. And it's because of the thickness of this really great fur yarn. You know, I have been a fan of eyelash yarn literally since I started knitting. And it doesn't matter how accomplished of a knitter I get, I am still, like, I am entranced by fur yarn. And this yarn, when I saw it at the Red Heart Home office, when they pulled it out to show me that this was their new yarn, I got so giddy and excited. And then they showed me that this cute little pattern was something I could teach people how to make. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is so adorable. And so I'm just super thrilled that I'm able to show you guys how to make this really cute pattern. You know what? I don't even think I told you who was the designer of it. Why don't I look that up? So of course, oh, Heather Ladinsky, of course. Heather Ladinsky is awesome when it comes to designing things like this. She just is really super talented, and it's not just baby stuff and such that she designs. She does all sorts of items. I know that I've seen sweaters and all, you know, you name it, she's done it. Here at the very end, I'm at the very end up here, and if I just kind of look, I can kind of see my yarn right there. So if I kind of fluff my eyelash, look at that. I'm fluffing my eyelash around it and it's invisible once again. Ta-da! I love that. It's so much fun. As far as weaving in these ends, what I like to do is I'm up here at the top. So I'm going to go in one last time over here to this side. And when I come back, you'll notice that I'm holding my finger right there. I'm kind of holding the loop that I had created, right? So the loop of what's coming back. So when I come back over, I'm going to come up through that loop just like I'm making a knot, because I'm going to make a knot. I know you're not supposed to put knots in your crochet. You're not supposed to put knots in your knitting, but I am going to make a knot because this is really thick, fun yarn, and it's for a child who is probably going to be really rough on the item. So I want to make sure that what I am creating is not going to come undone, right? I'm just going to put a little knot right there, just pull it through. All right. So I have my knot. I'm going to kind of flip to the inside, and I can see if I move the fur, I can kind of see the yarn here that I've created, you know, that I've been whip stitching. So I'm just taking my needle and I'm coming right down there. Can you see that? I'm just threading right through the whip stitch that I did. I'm coming down it, and then I'm just going to kind of pop back up through it again just to weave in my ends, because they're on the inside, they're never going to show. And I'm going to do it one more time. And as I'm doing this, I want to point out that as I'm sticking my needle in, I have my fingers here on the other side, feeling to make sure that my needle isn't coming through. And I'm going to pop it back down. I'll go ahead. I'll trim this up. Set this aside. Let's take a look. Look how cute these are. Oh my gosh, these are so adorable. Okay, so I have this cute little slipper. Look how cute they are. So cute. Such subtle shaping. Let me put that down. Can you see that? Such subtle, let's try this again. Subtle shaping when we did our little shaping decreases, and then we shaped up to the foot or up to the leg. If you wanted to add elastic to the inside of this, you totally could. Or if you want them to kind of be nice and slouchy slippers, you could do that as well. Okay, now you know how to make these super cute little slippers. Look how cute that is. Oh my gosh, that is just too adorable. I love this little boot. They have it in several different sizes. Again, look at your pattern, highlight the sizes that you're going, or the size you're going to make, and get some of this really great fur yarn. It's Red Heart Boutique fur. It's super great, you guys. It's so soft. And I can see lots of Christmas presents coming away, lots of really fun, even Halloween or birthday parties. Oh my gosh, imagine how cute this would be for us, like a birthday gift to a little girl. Super adorable. I love this. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and you will go out and grab some of this really great new yarn and make these super cute slippers by Heather Ladinsky. Don't forget, it is a free pattern over at redheart.com, where you can find all sorts of free patterns and video instructions taught by me, Marley Bird. Please hit subscribe right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel so you're up to date whenever there is a video released. I also have a newsletter you can sign up for over at marleybird.com. And as my kids say, please smash that like button to make sure other people know that you did enjoy today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.